Welcome back to Whispers in the Dark. If you are new here, settle in. Dim the lights and turn the volume up. Tonight's story is one you do not tell in a bright room. Tonight's story is about inheritance, about old money, about the kind of family legacy that does not sit in portraits or silverware, but in the walls, in the soil, in the things a house remembers long after the people inside have stopped pretending. And now take a breath and listen. I got the call on a Tuesday that tasted like pennies. That is the only way I can describe it. I was standing in my apartment kitchen, trying to coax a stubborn kettle into boiling, when my phone lit up with my mother's name. I remember the way the light from the screen fell across my palm, pale and sickly, as if it had already decided the shape of what it was about to say. My grandmother, Lenora, had died. There was no drama in my mother's voice. No wail, no crack. Just that careful flat tone people use when they are holding something heavy with both hands and do not want to spill it. She said it was in her sleep. She said it was peaceful. Then she paused, and in that pause, I could hear everything else. I could hear the old things in our family line shifting their weight. I could hear doors opening that had been shut for generations. Mom said she left the house to you. I laughed because it made no sense. My grandmother's house was the kind of place people fought over in movies. It sat on acre ridge that rolled like dark velvet. It had been in the family since before my great-grandfather learned to shave. It had wealth stitched into its beams, not the gaudy kind, but the quiet kind that never needed to prove itself. I had visited it only a handful of times, always under the strict supervision of Lenora's gaze, always feeling like I had wandered into a museum where the exhibits could watch me back. I'm not even her favorite, I said, trying to make it a joke. My mother made a sound that was almost a sigh, almost a laugh, almost a warning. You were the only one she trusted. That should have been my first clue. The drive out there took 3 hours, and the sky seemed to lower mile by mile, as if it wanted to press the world back into the earth. The road narrowed into rural lanes lined with trees that leaned inward, their branches interlacing overhead, until my car passed through a tunnel of wet leaves and shadow. I had not been there since I was 14. Even then, I had hated the house, though I could not have told you why. It was beautiful in the way old things are beautiful. It had symmetry and grace. It was painted a color that might have been white once, but had aged into something like bone. The windows were tall and narrow. The porch wrapped around the front like an arm that held you too long. When I turned into the long gravel drive, the sound of the tires was like teeth grinding. The house rose up ahead, and with it came a strange physical sensation, a tightening behind my ribs, as if my body recognized the place before my mind did. The wind moved through the fields in low ripples, and the tall grass bent in unison, like a crowd leaning to whisper. I parked and sat there a moment with the engine off, hands still on the wheel. The air smelled different out here, earthy, damp, with a faint sweetness like bruised fruit. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called, and the sound felt too loud, too deliberate. I told myself I was being dramatic. Grief does that, I thought. Grief turns empty houses into haunted ones. But when I stepped out and looked up at the front door, I saw that someone had hung a wreath on it. Not flowers, not evergreen. It was woven from thin strips of something dark and glossy, like dried vines or hair. I reached out, then stopped. My fingers tingled, as if the air between me and that wreath held a charge. I left it alone. The lawyer met me inside, a brisk man with a neat tie and eyes that kept sliding away from the corners of the room. He walked with the careful gait of someone who did not want to touch anything. When he handed me the papers, his skin felt cold. "She was very specific," he said. "You are to stay here at least 1 week before any sale or transfer. It is part of the conditions." "That's ridiculous," I said automatically. He did not smile. "It is enforceable." When he left, the sound of his car pulling away felt like abandonment. The house fell into a silence, so complete it seemed to have mass. My footsteps sounded wrong, too sharp against the wood. The air inside was cool, but not fresh. It carried the faint scent of lavender and old paper, and under that something else, something metallic that kept slipping away the moment I tried to name it. Lenora had kept the place immaculate. Every surface gleamed. The furniture sat exactly as I remembered, upholstered in dark fabric that swallowed light. Oil portraits lined the walls, stern faces in heavy frames. Their eyes followed you the way eyes do in paintings, but in this house, it felt less like an illusion and more like a habit. I wandered room to room with a kind of numbness, touching nothing. In the parlor, a grand piano sat closed like a mouth. In the dining room, a table stretched longer than any table needed to, as if expecting a feast that never came. At the end of the hall was Lenora's study. I hesitated there, hand hovering over the brass knob. I could remember being a child and being told not to go in. Not because it was dangerous, because it was not for me. As if it belonged to something that would not like being disturbed. The knob was colder than it should have been. When I turned it, the latch clicked with a sound that felt too loud. The study smelled the most like her. Lavender, ink, and something smoky like a candle snuffed out. The curtains were drawn, leaving the room in a dim brown light. A desk sat against the far wall, cluttered with neatly stacked papers. A bookcase filled one side of the room, its shelves packed tight. And in the corner, behind a high-backed chair, stood a locked wooden cabinet I did not remember. I did not go to it at first. I told myself I would be respectful. I told myself I would focus on practical things. I spent the first day cleaning the kitchen, making lists, calling my job to request more time off, unpacking my clothes in the guest room. That night, I tried to sleep. I lay in the guest bed listening to the house settle. Old houses make noises. They creak and sigh. They pop and whisper with the changing temperature. But this was different. There was a rhythm to it, like the house was breathing. At some point, I woke with the certainty that someone was standing in the doorway. My eyes snapped open. The room was dark. The curtains were thin, letting in the moonlight in pale strips. The doorway was a deeper darkness. I held my breath and stared. The shape did not move. It was not a person. It was too tall, too narrow, like a shadow stretched wrong across the threshold. My mind tried to form it into something logical. A coat hanging somewhere, the door partially closed, but it felt like it was looking at me. I blinked and the shape was gone. I lay awake until dawn, and when the first light seeped into the room, I felt foolish. The second day, I explored more thoroughly. There were rooms I had never been allowed into. A sewing room that smelled like dust. A sunroom filled with dead plants in pots that looked like bones. A basement door with a chain and padlock. The padlock was new. I leaned close and listened, half expecting to hear something behind it. I heard only my own pulse. In the afternoon, I went back to the study. I stood in front of the cabinet, running my fingers over the carved wood. It was ornate, with patterns that looked like vines or veins or something that wanted to be both. The cabinet was locked. I should have left it alone. Instead, I opened drawers on the desk, searching for a key. The top drawer held pens and letter openers. The second held envelopes, stamps, a small tin of lavender sachets. The third was locked too. I tried the second day's logic. If Lenora had left the house to me, she had left this too. If she wanted me to stay a week, she wanted me to find something. I searched until I found a small key taped under the lip of the desk, hidden where a hand might rest naturally. The tape was yellowed, as if it had been there a long time. My stomach turned. I held the key up and felt a sudden, irrational dread, like I was holding a tooth pulled from a sleeping animal. When I unlocked the cabinet, the mechanism made a soft click that sounded like relief. The doors swung open. Inside were stacks of ledgers and journals wrapped in cloth. Some were bound in leather, some in faded linen. They looked old enough to belong in an archive. At the bottom of the cabinet sat a single diary, smaller than the others, its cover dark and cracked, with a clasp that had been broken long ago. It was not wrapped. It was simply there, exposed. I picked it up. The leather felt warm, as if it had been waiting in a hand. The first page was blank. The second had a name written in neat, slanted handwriting. Lenora Whitcomb, my grandmother. I swallowed and turned the page. The entries began like any diary. Mundane details. Notes about weather, about repairs needed on the roof, about a neighbor's dog getting loose. Lenora's voice on the page was exactly what I remembered. Precise, controlled, like she was speaking through her teeth. Then, halfway through a later entry, the tone shifted. It was subtle at first, a line written slightly darker, as if she pressed harder. I had the dream again. The one with the long table, the one with the mouths. I stopped reading, suddenly aware of the quiet around me. The study felt colder. I looked toward the window, but the curtains were still drawn. I turned the page. Lenora wrote about a pact, not in a melodramatic way, not like a ghost story. She wrote about it like she was describing a contract. Our family did not earn its wealth by clever hands or honest work. It was given. We paid for it once, long ago, and we have been paying ever since. My throat went dry. She named a date. 1891. She named a place, the orchard behind the house, where the trees grew in a neat grid, their branches knotted and heavy with fruit that always tasted too sweet. She wrote that her grandfather, Silas Whitcomb, had been desperate. The farm was failing. The land was cursed with blight. His children were hungry. His wife was dying. And one night, he went into the orchard with a lantern and a knife, and he called out to something he had been told lived beneath the roots. He made an offering, and something answered. Lenora did not name it. She did not describe it in full. She used phrases that skirted the edges. The thing that listens under the ground, the mouth that has no face, the hunger that remembers names. She wrote that Silas promised it something in exchange for prosperity. Not just one payment, a line of payments, a schedule. Every year, on the same night, a life would be given. Not an animal, not a stranger stolen from the road. A blood tie, someone with Whitcomb in their veins. It demanded the body in a particular way. The diary did not linger on the act, but the implications were clear enough to make my hands tremble. A ceremonial killing, a preparation, a consumption. A ritual that turned the boundary between living and dead into something blurred and obscene. Then the thing would give what it always gave. The orchard would bloom. The land would thrive. The family's accounts would swell. Luck would settle on our shoulders like a shawl. But if the ritual was delayed, or done improperly, or refused entirely, the thing would take its payment anyway. Not one life, many. It would reach its hunger into the family, like a hand into a basket, and squeeze, until something burst. I stared at the pages until the words began to swim. I wanted to close the diary and put it back. I wanted to laugh and tell myself my grandmother had been losing her mind. Then I noticed something. Between one entry and the next, a blot of ink in the margin, like a thumbprint. It looked smudged by a hand that had been shaking. Lenora was not a shaky woman. I read on. She wrote about the first time she saw the consequences. A cousin, Sarah, who had refused to attend the yearly gathering. Sarah had gone to the city, married someone outside the family, tried to build her own life. The year Sarah did not return, the diary said, the visions began. Not for Sarah, for everyone else. They saw her in mirrors, in reflections on dark windows, in the sheen of a polished spoon. They would be standing alone and suddenly hear Sarah's voice behind them, softly calling their names. When they turned, there was no one, but the air would smell like the orchard in late summer, heavy and sweet. Then people began to get sick. It started as fatigue, a heaviness in the limbs, then fevers that did not break, then coughing fits that left blood in handkerchiefs. Doctors blamed infection, bad air, stress. Lenora wrote, "The body becomes a message. It writes the debt into flesh." And then came the deaths. She did not describe gore, but she described horror in the way that is worse, the way that leaves your mind to fill in the blanks. An uncle who woke up screaming that something was inside his throat, clawing to get out. A brother who wandered into the orchard at night and was found in the morning, eyes open, mouth full of soil, as if he had been trying to eat the ground. A sister who became convinced her skin was not hers, that it belonged to someone else, and tried to peel it away to find the truth underneath. Lenora wrote about sound, the sound of chewing heard through walls, the sound of wet roots being pulled from earth, the sound of a mouth smiling. My heart hammered. I looked up, suddenly sure that something was listening to the pages being turned. The house remained still. The portraits remained stern. I told myself again that it was a story. Then my phone rang. The sound made me jump so hard the diary nearly slipped from my fingers. It was my mother. Her voice was tight. "Your cousin June called. She said your Uncle Paul is in the hospital." "Paul's fine," I said automatically. "He was fine last week." "That's the thing," my mother whispered. "He is not. He got sick all at once. Fever, hallucinations." Hallucinations. My mouth went numb. My mother continued. "He keeps saying he can smell apples. He keeps asking why the house is hungry." I stared at the diary, at Lenora's careful handwriting, and felt the world tilt. "Mom," I said softly, "when was the last time the family got together?" There was a pause so long, I heard her swallow. We did not," she said. "Not this year. After Lenora passed, it felt wrong to do it without her." My stomach clenched. "What night is it?" I asked. "What do you mean, what night is it?" My mother snapped, then softened. "It's Tuesday." "Not that," I said, voice trembling. "The date." She told me, and my skin prickled, because it was the same week Lenora had underlined in her diary. I hung up and sat in the study with the diary open in my lap, listening to the house breathe. I told myself coincidences happen. I told myself grief makes patterns out of randomness. But that night, when I tried to sleep, I dreamed of a long table. It was set with silver and china, gleaming under candlelight. The room was not any room I recognized, but it felt like the house. The air smelled sweet, almost rotten, like fruit left too long on a counter. The table was surrounded by chairs. The chairs were occupied, but the figures in them were not people. They were shapes that suggested people, draped in darkness, too still. At the head of the table sat my grandmother. Lenora wore a black dress and a necklace of pearls. Her hands were folded. Her face was calm. She looked at me and said, "You should not have opened it." Behind her, the wall was made of something that shifted. Not wallpaper, not wood, something alive, like the inside of a mouth. The surface rippled as if something beneath it was swallowing. I tried to move, but my feet were stuck to the floor, as if the floor had turned to tar. Lenora's lips moved again. "It is awake now." Then the figures around the table leaned forward in unison, and I heard it. Not voices, not words. Chewing. I woke choking on my own breath. The room was cold. The moonlight lay across the floor like spilled milk. I sat up and pressed a hand to my throat. The air smelled faintly of apples. On the third day, I drove to town. I needed distance. I needed to see normal people doing normal things under normal fluorescent lights. At the grocery store, I stood in an aisle staring at jars of jam as if they held answers. My hands shook. A woman walked past me and smiled politely, and for a split second her teeth looked too many, too sharp. I blinked and she was normal again. I bought coffee and bread and a cheap bouquet of flowers I did not need. When I returned to the house, the wreath on the door was gone. In its place was a single apple, perfectly red, sitting on the threshold like an offering. I did not touch it. I stepped over it and went inside. The apple remained there behind me, like a punctuation mark. In the afternoon, June called. June's voice was brittle. "They moved Uncle Paul to intensive care," she said. "He keeps ripping at his blanket. He says something is pulling on his bones. He says it is counting." "Counting what?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. "Us," June whispered. "He says it is counting us." She started to cry. "I keep seeing Grandma Lenora in the hallway, but when I turn on the light, it's not her. It's like the dark is shaped like her." I closed my eyes. June's breathing hitched. "You're at the house, aren't you? You got it. You always got her attention. Did she tell you anything? Did she leave you something?" The diary felt heavy in my mind, like a stone in my pocket. "She left me a diary," I said. June went quiet, and in that quiet, I heard her fear turning to recognition. "Oh," she said finally. "Oh God, she finally did it." "What do you mean?" I asked. June swallowed audibly. "When we were kids, I heard my dad and Lenora fighting once. I was on the stairs. He was saying it was evil. She said it was older than evil. She said it was necessary. She said if anyone ever tried to stop it, the house would eat the family from the inside out." My fingers went numb. June whispered, "What does it say?" I did not answer. June exhaled ragged. Please tell me what to do." I looked at the study door, half expecting to see a shadow beneath it. "I don't know," I lied. "After the call, I opened Lenora's diary again. I read until my eyes ached. The entries became more frantic as the years went on. Lenora wrote about trying to keep control, about keeping the ritual precise, about choosing who would be offered. It was never random, she implied. It was always someone already slipping away from the family, someone who had become inconvenient, someone who could be described as a tragedy rather than a murder. A distant cousin with addiction, a relative with no children, someone who would not be missed loudly enough to bring questions. Reading it made bile rise in my throat. Lenora wrote about the act of consumption not as a feast, but as a requirement, a binding, a way to make the family complicit so the hunger could not be placed outside us. If you ate, you belonged. If you belonged, you were protected. Protected as long as the pact was fed. Near the end, Lenora's handwriting changed. The letters became less neat. The lines wavered. I think it has changed its mind, she wrote. I think it wants more than it used to. I think it has learned the taste of us. Then, weeks later, a different entry. Someone else is here in the orchard at night. I hear steps. I hear laughter. I see shapes between the trees. I think it is calling to the children. My breath caught. I had no children. June did. My brother Daniel did. The next generation. Lenora wrote about waking to find dirt under her nails, as if she had been digging in her sleep. About finding apple seeds in her pockets. About tasting sweetness on her tongue, even when she had not eaten. I started to notice things in the house. Small things at first. The way the air shifted when I walked past the basement door. The way the floorboards in the hallway seemed to dip slightly, as if something heavy had been dragged there repeatedly. And then, in the kitchen, I found a stain on the tile that had not been there before. A dark smear, almost black, that looked like old liquid soaked into grout. No matter how I scrubbed, it would not come out. That night, I stood in the bathroom brushing my teeth and caught a glimpse of movement behind me in the mirror. I froze with toothpaste foam on my lips. In the reflection, the hallway behind me was dark. The guest room door stood open. In that doorway was a figure, not tall this time, not stretched. My grandmother. Lenora stood there with her hands folded in front of her. Her face was pale, her eyes deep shadows. She looked as she had in her coffin at the funeral, makeup too perfect, lips too still. I stared, unable to breathe. Lenora's mouth opened, and the sound that came out was not a voice. It was the sound of chewing. I spun around. The hallway was empty. When I turned back to the mirror, my own face stared at me, wide-eyed, and behind me, the wall looked normal. But when I spat into the sink, the foam was pink. The next day, my brother Daniel called. He never called unless something was wrong. His voice was strained. Mom told me you're staying at the house. Just for the week, I said, trying to sound casual. There was a pause, then he said, I keep smelling apples. My stomach dropped. I was at work, he continued, and it hit me out of nowhere, like someone cut one open right next to my face. Then I saw something in the glass door of the office. He laughed, but the laugh was not right. It sounds crazy. What did you see? I asked. Daniel's voice lowered. I saw Dad. Our father had died 5 years ago. Heart attack. Sudden. We had called it misfortune. We had called it genetics. We had called it everything except hunger. Daniel swallowed. He was standing behind me, but when I turned, the office was empty. Then I started coughing, and I have not been able to stop. Fear had a texture then. It felt like cold syrup sliding down my spine. Daniel, I said carefully, have you been sick? I'm fine, he snapped, then coughed so hard I heard him gasp. When he spoke again, his voice was hoarse. It's just a cold. No, I whispered, not to him, but to the air. In the diary, Lenora had described the sequence. Visions, then illness, then the body becoming a message. I spent that day trying to leave. I packed my bag, shoved my clothes in hastily, told myself I was done with this, that the house was getting to me. When I opened the front door, the apple was still on the threshold, but it was no longer perfect. It had split open neatly, as if cut with a blade. The flesh inside was darkened and wet, and in the center where the seeds should have been, there was something else. Tiny pale shapes like teeth. I slammed the door and backed away, heart hammering. Behind me, somewhere deeper in the house, I heard a soft thump, like something heavy shifting in the walls. I did not leave. That night the wind rose. It howled around the eaves and pressed against the windows. The house made its breathing noises, but now they sounded almost eager. I sat in the study with the diary open, a lamp casting a small circle of light. Outside that circle, the room felt bottomless. I read the last entries. Lenora wrote about regret, but not the tidy kind. Not the kind you confess and then feel lighter. It was the kind that gnawed. I thought I could manage it. I thought I could keep it contained. But containment is a lie. Hunger spreads. Then, a few pages later, I tried to stop. 1 year I refused. I locked the cellar. I told them no more. That night, the house filled with whispering. The orchard glowed like it had fireflies trapped in its branches. And in the morning, my sister was dead and my father was missing, and the soil in the orchard was freshly turned. Lenora wrote that she resumed the pact, not because she believed in it, but because the alternative was worse. Then came the final entry. Her handwriting was barely legible. If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and you have the house, and it has found you. I am sorry. I am sorry. I am sorry. It is not just in the orchard anymore. It is in the walls. It is in the family. It is in the blood. Do not think you can outsmart it. Do not think you can starve it. It will eat you from the inside. It will make you watch. It will make you choose. And then, in a different ink, darker, as if written in a hurry, with a stronger hand. There is another way, but it is worse. You must give it what it truly wants. Not a distant cousin, not a weak link. It wants the heir. It wants the one who holds the house. My breath stalled. I looked around the study. The lamp flame flickered. For a moment, the shadows on the walls seemed to swell, leaning in as if listening. A soft sound came from the hallway. Footsteps, slow, barely there, like someone walking without lifting their feet. I snapped the diary shut and stood, chair scraping the floor. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath. Then, from the other side of the study door, I heard something else. A wet, pleased sound. A small sound, intimate. Chewing. I did not open the door. I backed away until my shoulder hit the bookcase. The lamp flickered again, and the room went dimmer, as if the darkness was drinking the light. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking, and called my mother. She answered on the first ring, breathless, as if she had been waiting. "Mom," I whispered, "tell me the truth." Silence. "Tell me," I repeated, voice cracking. "Tell me what you know." My mother's voice was quiet. "Lenora told me once," she said. "She told me, and I refused to believe her." My throat tightened. What did she say? My mother exhaled, and the sound was full of old fear. She said the family's luck came with a cost. She said every year she had to handle it. She said if she stopped, the deaths would not be accidents anymore. They would be punishments. I pressed a hand to my mouth to keep from making noise. My mother continued, voice trembling. She said one day she would be too old to do it. One day she would die, and the house would need someone new. "Why me?" I whispered. My mother was silent. Then she said, "Because you are the only one who came back without being called." The hairs on my arms rose. "What do you mean?" My mother's voice broke. "Because you always stared at the orchard when you were little. You always looked like you were listening." A cold prickling spread over my scalp. Behind me, the study door knob turned. Slowly, deliberately, I stared at it, frozen. It turned again. The latch clicked. My mother was still speaking, but her words became distant, as if the house was swallowing sound. The door opened a crack. Darkness seeped through like smoke. I could smell apples, sickly sweet, thick enough to taste. The crack widened. Something on the other side shifted. Not a person, not an animal. A presence, a density. I could not see it clearly, but I felt it like pressure in my skull. The lamp went out. The study plunged into darkness, lit only by the faint glow of my phone screen. In that dim light, I saw the diary in my hand, and I realized my fingers were dirty, soil under my nails, as if I had been digging. My mother's voice rose sharply through the phone. "What is happening? What's happening, Shaz?" The presence moved closer. I heard breathing that was not mine. I backed away blindly, bumping into the desk, and my hand hit something cold and metallic. The desk drawer key, the basement key perhaps, Lenora's hidden tools. My mind raced, trying to find logic in a place that did not honor it. The diary had said there was another way, but it was worse. Give it what it truly wants. The air. It wanted me. And suddenly, I understood what Lenora's final warning really meant. It was not asking for a sacrifice. It was asking for surrender. To keep the family alive, someone had to become the hunger's hands. Someone had to become the house. The presence leaned closer, and in the darkness, I saw a suggestion of shape, as if the air itself was being pulled into a form. I saw a curve that could have been a smile. I saw movement like a tongue shifting behind teeth. My mother sobbed into the phone. Please, please come home. Home, I almost laughed. The house was home. That was the problem. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. I shoved past the open study door, through the hall, bare feet slapping wood. The air in the hallway felt thicker, like walking through breath. The portraits seemed to watch with hungry patience. I reached the stairs and took them two at a time, not toward the front door, but down toward the basement. I do not know why. Maybe some part of me wanted to confront the lock, the chain, the new padlock. Maybe some part of me knew that the belly of the house held answers. The basement door was at the end of the kitchen corridor. The chain was there, padlock gleaming faintly in the dark. My hands shook so badly, I dropped the key once, then again. Behind me, the house made a sound. Not a creak, not a settling, a low, satisfied hum, like a throat clearing in anticipation. I got the key into the padlock and turned. It popped open. The chain fell away with a metallic clatter that echoed too long, as if the house enjoyed the sound. I yanked the door open. Cold air rushed up from below, smelling of damp earth and something faintly sweet. The basement stairs descended into darkness. I flicked on the light. The bulb buzzed. It cast a sickly yellow glow over stone walls and shelves lined with jars. The jars were filled with cloudy liquid, and inside the liquid floated pale shapes I refused to name. My stomach lurched. At the far end of the basement was another door, smaller, half hidden behind stacked crates. On it was a symbol carved into the wood, a looping pattern that looked like roots and veins and a mouth all at once. The hum grew louder behind me, as if the house was pleased I had come here. I held my phone up like a talisman and stepped closer to the carved door. My mother's voice came through the phone, frantic. Shaz, answer me, please. I swallowed hard and whispered, Mom, listen to me. If Daniel gets worse, if June gets worse, if anyone starts seeing things, you get them away from the house, away from the orchard, away from anything Whitcomb. My mother sobbed. What are you talking about? I pressed my palm to the carved symbol. The wood was warm, like skin. A memory hit me, sudden and sharp. Me at 14, staring out a window at night, seeing the orchard shimmering faintly, and feeling drawn, like the trees were calling my name. I had thought it was curiosity. It was recognition. The carved door shifted beneath my hand. Not opening. Breathing. I pulled back, shaking. The diary's words echoed. It wants the heir. It wants the one who holds the house. The truth landed in me like a stone. Lenora had not left me the house as a gift. She had left me as a replacement. And the house, whatever lived beneath it, had accepted. Behind me, a shadow fell across the basement stairs, blocking the light. I did not turn around. I did not want to see what stood there. I heard the chewing sound again, closer now, intimate and patient. And then, softly, a voice that was not a voice, a sound that formed my name without using a mouth. Shaz. I squeezed my eyes shut. I thought of Daniel coughing, of June crying, of Uncle Paul in a hospital bed smelling apples and saying the house was hungry. If I ran, if I fled, the hunger would follow the bloodline and take what it wanted anyway. If I stayed, if I accepted, the family might live. But what would I become? My grandmother had carried this. She had done what she did so others could call their misfortunes accidents and their wealth earned. She had taken the stain onto her hands so no one else had to look at it. And now she was gone, and the stain was looking for new skin. My phone slipped in my sweaty grip. I caught it, and my mother's voice was a distant wail. I looked at the jars again, the cloudy liquid, the pale shapes. I looked at the carved door. A pulse moved through it, slow and eager. I thought of the orchard above, trees heavy with fruit, roots drinking deep. I thought of my childhood, my instinctive attention to the trees, my longing to listen, my quiet fascination with the forbidden corners of the house. Had it been grooming me all along? My breath came in shallow gasps. "Mom," I whispered, "I love you." "No," my mother cried. "No, please, just come home, please." The chewing stopped. The hum quieted. The house waited. In that waiting, I felt something like an offer, a gentle push, a promise wrapped in rot. Give yourself, and the others will be spared. Refuse, and watch them fall one by one, visions first, then sickness, then the body writing its debt in blood and breath and bone. I do not remember deciding. I remember stepping toward the carved door. I remember the warmth under my palm. I remember the wood softening like flesh under pressure. I remember the smell, not just apples now, but something older, deeper, like soil turned in the dark. The door opened without a sound. Darkness spilled out, thicker than night, and with it, a sensation like being recognized, like being welcomed into a mouth. My phone went dead. The basement light flickered and went out, and in the darkness beyond the door, I heard it clearly, not chewing this time, but something like speech, slow and pleased. "Mind." The next thing I remember is waking on the basement floor, the light buzzing again above me. My clothes were damp. My hands were filthy with soil. My mouth tasted sweet, as if I had bitten into fruit. The carved door was closed. The jars on the shelves sat in their rows, quiet and still. Upstairs, the house felt calmer. The air was less thick. The portraits seemed less intent. My phone turned on. Dozens of missed calls, messages, voicemails. I listened to one from June. Her voice was shaky, but relieved. Uncle Paul's fever broke, she said. The hallucinations stopped. He was still weak, but the doctor said he was improving unexpectedly, almost miraculously. Daniel texted, hours of coughing, and then it just stopped. Weirdest thing, I feel fine now. My mother left a voicemail that was mostly sobbing, then a whisper, trembling. What did you do? I sat on the kitchen floor and stared at the dark stain in the grout. It looked darker now, fresher, as if it had been fed. I did not respond. That night, I dreamed again of the long table. This time, I was seated at the head, a place set for me. A candle flame reflected in silver. The shadowed figures leaned in, patient. Lenora stood behind my chair. Her hands rested on my shoulders, heavy and cold. I am sorry, she whispered. I tried to turn and look at her, but my neck would not move. Lenora continued, now you will understand. On the table in front of me sat an apple, split open neatly, and inside were seeds that looked like teeth. I woke with the taste of sweetness on my tongue and the smell of the orchard drifting through my window. I stayed the full week because the papers said I had to. But the truth is I could not have left even if I tried. The house did not clamp chains around my ankles. It did not lock the doors. It did not need to. Every day the orchard looked a little greener. Every day the air in the house felt more familiar, less hostile, as if it was adjusting to my presence the way a body adjusts to a new organ. And every day I found small signs that I had been moving at night. Soil on my feet, leaves in the sheets, an apple core in the trash that I did not remember eating. I read the diary again and again, searching for loopholes, for mercy, for some way to break the cycle without spilling it onto someone else. There were no loopholes, only inheritance. In the last pages, Lenora had written one final line, squeezed into the margin, as if she could not stop herself. If you become it, you can steer it. Not stop it, but steer it. Choose the least damage. Choose the guilty. Choose the ones who would feed it anyway. It was not hope. It was the kind of compromise you make when you are standing on the edge of a fire. And the only way not to burn is to hold someone else over the flames. I wish I could tell you I chose a better path. I wish I could tell you I sold the house, burned the orchard, called the authorities, ran far away. But the house is not a place. It is a lineage. It is a hunger threaded through blood like a vein. You cannot flee your own body. The first year came quickly. It is strange how time behaves when you are waiting for a debt to come due. Days stretch like skin. Nights fold in on themselves. Every sound becomes a possibility. Every shadow becomes a mouth. As the date approached, my dreams became sharper. The long table, the chewing, the voice saying mine, and the visions returned, not to me, but to my family. June called, sobbing. She said her little boy had started drawing pictures of trees with faces. She said he kept asking when they would go to the apple house. She said he had started waking at night and standing at the window, whispering to the darkness like he was answering someone. Daniel called, furious, insisting I was poisoning them with superstition. But his voice shook. He said he saw Lenora in the rearview mirror while driving, sitting in the back seat, smiling without showing teeth. He said the car had filled with the smell of apples so strong he had nearly crashed. My mother tried to pray. It did not help. The sickness came next. Fever, fatigue, a strange pressure behind the eyes, and always that sweetness, that awful sweetness, clinging to their breath no matter what they ate. I watched it happen through phone calls and messages and helpless silence, and the guilt grew inside me like a second heartbeat. The night before the date, I stood in the orchard with a lantern. The trees were heavy with fruit, branches bending low. The air was warm, wrong for the season. The ground under my feet felt soft, as if it had been freshly turned. I held the lantern up, and the light made the apples gleam like wet hearts. And then I heard it. Not footsteps, not chewing, a whisper rising from under the soil, sliding up through roots and into air, forming words without a mouth. Feed. I stood there, lantern trembling in my hand. I thought of my family, weakening, seeing things, their bodies becoming messages. I thought of Lenora, alone with this for decades, making impossible choices with hands that never stopped shaking. I thought of what the diary said. If you become it, you can steer it. I do not know how long I stood there, but I know that when I turned back toward the house, the lantern light caught something moving between the trees. A shape that might have been a person at first glance, except it moved too smoothly, like a shadow sliding over grass. It paused, and I felt it notice me, not with eyes, with hunger. The lantern flame flickered, and for a moment the orchard looked like the inside of a mouth, rows of teeth, slick and waiting. I ran back to the house. I locked the doors out of reflex, though locks mean nothing to Roots. In the study, I opened Lenora's diary and stared at the pages until my vision blurred. Human sacrifice, the diary had said, in a certain way every year. Consumption, complicity, binding. If I had to do it, I would do it differently. Not to stop it, to steer it. That is the part you will want me to confess. The part you will want details of. The exact method, the exact horror. I will not give it to you. Not because I am ashamed, though I am. Not because I fear judgment, though I do. Because I have learned something Lenora learned too late. Stories are invitations. The more clearly you describe the ritual, the more power you give it to repeat itself in the mind. The more you speak its hunger aloud, the more it listens. So I will tell you only what matters. The date passed. The sickness lifted from my family like a fog burned away by sun. June's boy stopped drawing trees with faces. Daniel stopped coughing. Uncle Paul recovered fully, as if the hospital had misdiagnosed him. And in the orchard, the trees bloomed as if laughing. After that night, the house became quieter, not safer, not kinder, just sated. I started to understand my grandmother's handwriting. The way it tightened when she lied. The way it pressed harder when she feared the walls might listen. I started to understand why she never let me wander alone. Why she watched me when I stared at the orchard. Why she chose me in the end. Because some part of her knew the hunger had already chosen. Now the years keep coming. The date comes around like a finger tapping on glass. My family starts to see things. They start to smell apples. Their bodies begin to bend under an invisible hand. And I go down into the basement, into the room behind the carved door, and I do what must be done to keep them breathing. Sometimes I tell myself I am doing it for love. Sometimes I know I am doing it because the house wants me to. Sometimes I stand at the window at night and watch the orchard ripple in the wind, and I feel a strange warmth in my chest, like pride, like belonging. That is the worst part, not the fear, not the horror, not the blood-soaked history of a family that called itself respectable while feeding a mouth beneath its feet. The worst part is that the house does not only take from you. It gives. It gives relief. It gives prosperity. It gives the sickening comfort of knowing the suffering will stop as soon as you obey. It trains you like that. And once it has trained you, you begin to wonder whether you could ever live without the sweetness on your tongue. I am telling you this now because the diary is not the only thing hidden in this house. There are other journals in that cabinet, older ones written in different hands, each one a map of compromises, each one a record of the hunger learning and changing, getting smarter. I have read them all, and I have learned that Lenora was right. It wants more than it used to. The yearly offering is no longer enough. The visions begin sooner. The illness comes faster. The relief lasts shorter. It is impatient now. It is tasting the future. Last night, I woke to find myself standing in the hallway with dirt under my nails and a perfect apple cradled in my palms like a heart. I do not remember getting out of bed. I do not remember walking. I remember only the feeling of being led down the stairs, toward the basement, toward the carved door that breathed like a sleeping animal. When I came to myself, I was kneeling on the kitchen tile by the dark stain, and my mouth was sweet again. I looked up, and in the reflection of the oven glass, I saw Lenora standing behind me. But it was not her face anymore. It was something wearing her shape, like a mask made of memory. And it smiled, and the smile was too wide, and in the silence, I heard the soft, private sound of chewing. Then it leaned close to my ear, and with a voice that was almost Lenora's, it whispered, "Next year, it wants your brother." My hands went cold. I shook my head, whispering no, no, no. The thing behind me chuckled, a sound like roots sliding through wet earth. And then it whispered again, even softer, "Or you." I turned around, but there was nothing there. Only the hallway, only the portraits, only the house breathing. I am writing this because I am afraid my grandmother's diary was not a warning. It was a handoff, a way to make sure the next person understood the rules, so the pact would never be broken, so the hunger would never have to punish too many at once, so it could keep feeding gently, patiently, year after year, generation after generation. I am writing this because I want someone outside this bloodline to know. Not to help me, not to save us, just to witness, because the house hates witnesses. It prefers secrets. It prefers family gatherings with closed curtains. It prefers contracts signed in silence. It prefers a world that calls the deaths accidents and calls the wealth earned. So here is my witness, spoken into the dark where you can hear it. If you ever inherit an old house with an orchard that blooms too beautifully, if the air smells faintly sweet even in winter, if you find a diary hidden behind a locked cabinet door, do not read it. Do not learn the rules. Do not become capable of steering, because steering is still driving, and the road always leads back to the mouth, under the roots. Sometimes I sit on the porch at dusk and watch the fields turn dark, and I think about leaving. I think about burning everything. I think about letting the hunger take what it will and ending it forever. Then my phone buzzes. A message from June. A photo of her boy smiling, missing his front teeth. A video of Daniel laughing with his daughter. My mother sending a heart emoji like she does when she does not know what else to say. And I feel the house behind me, listening. I smell apples, and I know I will go down into the basement again when the time comes, because the pact does not just consume bodies. It consumes choices. It consumes the parts of you that believe there is a clean way out. It leaves you with only two kinds of love: the love that sacrifices yourself and the love that sacrifices someone else. And if you think you know which one is worse, you have never felt a house breathe with relief when you obey. My name is Shaz Whitcomb, and I live in my grandmother's house. The orchard is blooming again. The date is coming, and somewhere beneath the roots, something unspeakable is smiling, because it knows the oldest truth of all. Everything that inherits can be inherited right back. Now, before you go, a quick word. If this story got under your skin, if you felt that slow tightening in your chest, if you caught yourself smelling apples that are not there, please take a second to like the video and subscribe. It helps the channel more than you might think, and it makes sure you do not miss the next tale we pull from the shadows. Thanks for listening to Whispers in the Dark. Good night.
whispers of a love so true, painting dreams of me and you. And I'll hold you close in this moment so divine, whispers of the